Welcome back to Ohio Counseling Conversations, the official podcast of the Ohio Counseling Association, bringing you updates and conversations from around the state. In today's episode, we sit down with Dr. Michael Lewis, the current president of the Ohio Counseling Association, clinician, and professor. We explore the hats he wears as someone in the profession, his work with OCA, including key initiatives and challenges facing counselors in Ohio. Additionally, we discuss his thoughts on supporting students and in leadership, his research on gaming addiction and the impact of gaming on mental health, and how this evolving issue is being addressed in the counseling profession. And as always, I am your host today, Dr. Marissa Cargill, a counselor in Northeast Ohio and counselor educator at the University of Akron. Let's dig in. Welcome back to Ohio Counseling Conversations. I am your host, Dr. Marissa Cargill, and today we have the fortune to be joined by OCA President Dr. Michael Lewis. Hi, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I know that listeners probably have seen emails come from you and things like that, but as we do with most guests, can you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Michael Lewis, as she said. I'm originally from Springfield, Ohio, which is all the buzz these days, as you've probably heard. So my social feeds are all kinds of real fun right now, as you can quite imagine. But I moved to Columbus in 1995 when I went to Ohio Dominican University for college, and I've stayed in Columbus ever since. I graduated from the Ohio State University in '03 with my master's in counseling, counselor education, and then I finished my PhD in 2016. I work at Capital University. I'm an associate professor there and the program coordinator for our counselor education program. I live with my wife, who's also a mental health therapist in Columbus, with me and my cat Simon. Who, if you know me, then you know about Simon. So that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yes, I am a cat mom also, so I understand like cat parenting is fun and special. Uh, so you mentioned, coming into this field around like the early 2000s and then getting into counselor education and finishing your PhD. What led you into the world of counseling?
Counseling was always something I think really about halfway through high school. I started kind of getting a sense of this idea that I could make money to talk to people. As many people do, and you kind of get it's like, wow, that's a pretty good gig. And I had friends who were dealing with some mental health issues, and one in particular who attempted suicide, and working through some of that with her after the fact. And she made the comment to me, "I like talking to you better than I like talking to my therapist." And I thought, wow, maybe there's something to be said there. So I kind of started looking at it a little bit more. And before that, I was 100% going into architecture. I was already taking drawing classes and engineering classes. And it really made me rethink about my career path. And so I took a psych class in high school, and then I was instantly hooked. And so going into college, I knew my pathway, and I went for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I teach career counseling courses, and I'm always so fascinated to see like
Mhm.
how that development went forth for people. So you got into the field, but then there became this level of involvement with OCA, and now you're the president. Can you tell us like how that journey came to be?
Before I jump into that, I have a little bit of a funny aside. Uh,
Yeah.
you mentioned career counseling, and one of those things like during high school, and even since then, I would take career counseling assessments, and the thing that would always pop in this, I kind of affirmed what I
Mhm.
was thinking is like counseling would always be one of the top ones, but always the kind of the funny one is that always kind of pops up is glass blower. So you never know. Maybe that's my next great career.
Yeah, well,
Um,
we can do leisure and like hobby activities to fulfill those needs, right? That's
that's right. That's right.
That's awesome.
Um, but in terms of getting into OCA, I want to say it was around 2010 or so. As I mentioned, my wife is also a mental health clinician, and she had graduated from Ohio State around that time as well. And she started thinking both of us really going through the program at OSU were taught well to think about uh, professional counseling not just as a career, but more broadly from the work that we do with clients, but we also have a role in advocacy and being involved in the profession as a whole. And I think that we both took that to heart. And so she said to me, we should reach out to OCA and see how we can get involved. So at that time, Dr. Vicky Kress was the president. And so we both emailed her, and she said, "Yeah, okay, send me your resume and Vitas, and we'll take a look and see where you fit." And then within a couple weeks, my wife Laura was the president of the Central Ohio Counseling Association who had a need, and I was the chair of the professional development committee. And we said, "Oh, I guess that's how you get involved." And it's just kind of grown from there. I've taken on different roles over the years. After I was finished my role with the professional development committee, I took on a role as the president elect of the Ohio or College Counseling Association. I've worked as the liaison to the Ohio Counseling Board for several years before then taking on this role as president, president elect, president now.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's funny and soft plug because Victoria Cress is going to be our next guest on our
Uh,
next episode. So it all comes together,
and all,
right?
that's right, and she's fantastic. I absolutely adore her.
Yeah. So even in speaking and what you've shared with us in your professional organization like commitment and in that growth journey as well as just like your journey into the profession itself, you've mentioned about some of the roles that you've had, and it seems like this is a common theme amongst counselors that we wear a lot of hats. So you're wearing the OCA president hat and have had other leadership roles, within OCA, clinician, professor. How do you manage balancing all of those roles and wearing those hats?
Sometimes I don't know if I do that well. But fortunately, I have my partner also is very involved in lots of different things, wearing several different hats, and so I think that we drive each other. But it's not really so bad when you're passionate about what you're doing, and I think that we're doing things that we feel connected to, and it makes it just a little bit easier. It's also easier that we're also doing very similar things, so we can share and support each other in that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. I was thinking like, yeah, we're human. Sometimes we don't always feel like we're balancing things well, but you bring up the important part is when we have support, maybe it doesn't feel so difficult.
There are
Uh,
still days.
yeah, which is human. Yeah. For folks maybe who are struggling to balance a lot of different responsibilities in their career, any advice?
I I think that's an interesting question because I think it can vary from person to person. And I tell a lot of my students, when you first get in out of the program, take the opportunities that come to you, because you never know what's going to really hit for you, what's going to connect to your own values and purpose. Um, and as you start getting experience, then to start prioritizing what motivates you, what matches with your values, where do you feel like you belong, where can you put your energy that will give it back to you. Then that will really tell you where you should then prioritize your time and efforts. But until then, explore. Take some opportunities that you might not otherwise try.
Mhm. Be a sponge till you figure out what it is that really kind of lights you up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. Um, with a lot of different leadership experiences within OCA and beyond, can you tell us what leadership means to you?
That's a hard question because I think sometimes it's about who are you leading? Who are you connected with? What's the purpose? But I think trying to drill down on that, helping people find where they belong as part of the whole, and how their unique talents can fit. I think so often people have their talents squandered because they're not put in a position to really let those things shine. So I think when I think about leadership and doing a good assessment on your team to help put them in a position to be successful. And whatever that means. Not everybody has the same set of talents. Not everybody feels comfortable in front of an audience. Some people feel more comfortable doing data gathering. Some people are really good over here and over there. If you help put them in successive places,
Hmm.
it's going to help everybody, and they're going to feel like, one, they belong, which I think is very important, that they have purpose, and that they're contributing. And then as the whole organization wins, they win, and we all move together.
Hmm. Yeah, a real like strengths based approach of like, let's find where you like can thrive.
Yeah.
And when you feel that way, maybe you will feel more connection to the larger mission in the organization or group that you're belonging to.
Perfectly said. I should have said what you said.
No, no, you said it great. I'm just reflecting back. It's I love that. Help people find where they belong. I think that is pretty powerful. Um, and thank you for having that. Like I think that is really meaningful to a lot of people. Um, as a leader in the profession right now, what do you think are maybe some important trends or topics that especially to OCA members should be kind of top of mind?
Yeah, there's always threats that push against our profession and the clients that we're serving. And if you're not paying attention to some of the things, make sure that you're checking our newsletters and kind of paying attention to some of the legislation that's coming through. The politics of House Bill 68, for example, is certainly a hot button and dramatically impacting the LGBTQ plus communities and their families. And it's certainly something that OCA has advocated against and spoken about to our legislation. Unfortunately, in vain to some degrees. But there's also other things that are coming down the pike that we need to be aware of. For example, the mental health assistant licensure passed the Ohio Senate in July. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's essentially sort of kind of like a physician's assistant that's mentally health based, but they would be able to do prescriptions. They would have a pathway to licensure at a master's level. And there's some concern about how that's going to push against our profession. How well will they be trained clinically? Um, how are we going to market these kind of folks versus clinical mental health counselors? Uh, will it confuse people looking for care? I think that there's a lot of unknowns, and I think what's really upsetting about this, and this is where I think OCA and even the higher board are kind of landing, is why aren't we putting more resources in existing services instead of putting money and resources in building a new licensure that overlaps with what we already do? We already have psychiatric care, we already have
Yeah.
psychologists, we already have mental health counselors. Why are we then kind of overlapping and confusing it even more?
Yeah. Yeah, and it is confusing for most people who haven't really had exposure to mental health support before. Like who's what? Like what do those letters after their name mean? And yeah, I think that that's an excellent point and something that, you know, I hope that we as a podcast, but like I know that we as an organization at large do try to make sure people know what's going on in Ohio legislation and beyond so that we can um, get involved in maybe some more macro level advocacy to support not only our profession, but the people that we serve.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well said. I think um, there's a lot of things that we can do at small levels, at big levels. You don't have to be fully engaged in leadership to still have impact. And so reaching out and letting people know that you're willing to help, I think can go a long way.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think to that point, I'll piggyback, like, it's so important that even on the maybe more minor levels, micro, levels, you can write a letter. Anyone can write a letter. There are so many easy ways, especially because sometimes we give, as an organization, like the GRC, like, might give a template that we can use, but there are other ways to do that. I am I'm a letter writing machine. I use ResistBot. If you've never heard of it, you don't have to have any specific platform or opinion, but you can text this AI bot and it helps you draft a letter all through your phone. So, you don't even have to get up from the couch to do that.
Well, I
And
like that.
yeah. So, coming back to like leadership ideology and philosophies, I guess like helping people find their purpose and where they belong is meaningful to you. Any other like leadership philosophies that you really ascribe to?
Um, uh, Let people decide how they want to be led. I think often leaders think about their leadership style and how they want to, foster that with their followers. But I think more so, let them figure out how they want to be led. Some people need more guidance and structure. Other people like to find their own pathways. And I think as long as we're all moving towards our goals and what we're being asked to accomplish, it doesn't necessarily matter how we get there. I was very fortunate that I had and have had in several of my positions, bosses who let me do things the way I needed to do them and didn't micromanage and overwatch how I did them or when I was doing them because there was some level of trust. But I know I've also worked with colleagues who really need that structure and feedback and great. So the leader can be both of those things. You just have to sometimes ask, what do people need? If you give people freedom and provide them the resources, they're just much more likely to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I I love that. And sometimes it depends. Like I had a professor who would never let us give that as an answer because in our world, right? Like things can be so contextual that it depends is an easy out, but like take a stance. But it does depend. Like there have been roles where it's like, okay, I didn't necessarily want to be micromanaged, but a little more structure would have been helpful. But then I like look back on that role and be like, well, I learned a lot because I had to, but then could translate that to future positions where it's like, okay, like I'm okay with not being micromanaged.
Well, I think even to that degree, this is one of the reasons why I really dislike rubrics. And I know that maybe I'm in the minority. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I don't like rubrics because then what I get from my students is I'm doing what I'm writing or my project based on the rubrics. I'm going to get things that look all the same. And I think that that pushes against the idea of like functional fixedness. How can we be creative? How can we accomplish the goal that's being set forth in the project, the paper, the whatever, and do it that's connected to my personality, that's connected to who I am authentically. And I enjoy that so much more. I know that students sometimes hate that because they want more structure and that, and I'll give them more structure if they need it, but I also want to give them some freedom to explore, what that project specifically means to them or what's going to be meaningful.
Mhm. Yeah, oh, I like that a lot. I feel like as, I'm not a current student, but I feel like I'm a student of life, right? But I think that that's so helpful because I remember even writing my dissertation, I was like, academic writing, oof. Like, it's just not my passion. No shade to the people whose passion it is, but I like communicating. I like being able to share ideas and things like that, but it was just like that structure of what air quotes academic writing was supposed to look like was really a challenge for me. So I can like really relate to what you're saying and how that might be really helpful in how we lead students or others alike. That's awesome.
Amen to all of that.
Yeah. I was an undergrad communication media major, hence podcast like stuff. And so like it was like a little bit more like I was into the fun, like not that academic writing isn't fun. I'm not trying to trash talk it. It just wasn't my forte or like passion. So I can see how like creating spaces for people to have other means of completing the mission or the initiative, whether it's in a classroom environment or otherwise. Like, how does it work for you? And that really is kind of coming back to that strength based approach I hear in a lot of your approaches to how you support people.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think I'm with you. I like research. I
Hmm.
like learning new things. I like to explore topics, but boy, do I just not like the writing of it. It's just not
Yeah,
where I feel satisfied. But if you want me to put together a presentation on it and speak about it,
a
great,
100%.
wonderful. Do
Yeah.
it all the time.
Like, I hardly ever read fiction. I'm always reading nonfiction, research, that kind of stuff. I like it, but I just don't wanna write it.
Yeah, yeah, same.
Yeah.
Shout
Um,
out to shout out to our people who are feeling connected with that. You matter too.
and shout out to the people who like writing because
Yeah,
I do enjoy your product. I just am not interested in creating it most of the time.
exactly. Thank you to you as well.
Yes. I know that a lot of our conversation so far has been focused on your leadership roles and philosophies, but you mentioned when we were trying to schedule this interview some research in gaming addiction, excuse me, and that you're really interested in this topic. Can you tell us a little bit more about like your interest and why it's relevant today?
Certainly. So this was part of my dissertation research, looking at gaming addiction, and it's interesting because it was one of those things that I started actually looking into in 2003 when I was doing my comprehensive exams for my master's, and gaming was, I mean, obviously games have been around for 50, 60 years in some form, video gaming specifically. Uh, but at that time, massively multiplayer online role playing games such as World of Warcraft, which is the one that maybe most people have heard of, those were becoming more popular in the early 2000s. And I was playing these games and it was making me wonder about, like, okay, hearing things around process addictions, particularly gambling. How does that relate and compare with something like gaming? Also hearing things like pornography and shopping and other process addictions. And there just wasn't a lot of research. I think I could find maybe two or three articles kind of generally talking about like internet addiction, and I was trying to make some general run. What was interesting is when I started doing my research in gaming addiction by 2013, there had been an explosion of research around this topic. And even the DSM-5, when it came out a few years later, made an ask and said, "Hey, we're looking at gaming addiction as a possible disorder that we're going to add to the DSM-5, but we need more research." And I agree, we have to better understand what that looks like. So I was interested in wanting to do this research. So I kind of set out to understand, what are the things that motivate people to play video games, and then where do we find that threshold that they cross over and it becomes problematic. And in general, the DSM has a paucity of disorders related to process addictions because gambling disorder is really the only one. And so we're kind of basing a lot of what we do off of those ideas. But the research is really out there that supports a lot of behavioral addictions, pornography, shopping, sex, gaming, technology. I've mentioned, but it doesn't also stop there. I think that any behavior can really become problematic. It's just understanding how to discern where that line is. And that was part of where my research kind of fell.
Yeah, yeah. I can so appreciate that because my dissertation was on social media addiction.
Oh,
So,
oh, we're
I
kindred spirits.
yeah, yeah. What are some signs that you feel like someone would notice that their client, loved one might be struggling with gaming addiction?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it can be very nuanced. Someone who is passionate, enjoying games, can look very similar to someone who's has a problematic relationship with gamings, and the same can be said for other behaviors. I mean, we look at things like exercise, and we go, "Well, how can something like exercise be addictive?" But isn't exercise good? And if exercise is good, isn't more exercise even better? But we look for things like, as we do with many disorders, we look at how is it impacting other areas of our life. Is it Is it decreasing our ability to be functional at work, at school, with our family, our responsibilities? You know, specifically with gaming, you might see forms of bound irritability when they're not able to play, daydreaming and planning for their next play session, forsaking other previously joyful activities in lieu of choosing to game or over game, spending more time gaming than they intend to, difficulty stopping. Time isn't really necessarily a factor because, you know, if you're passionate about something, you're going to spend more time doing it. But when it crosses over and it starts impacting other areas, that's when we start thinking there might be something going on there. I don't know. In your research, did you ever come across this idea of the model of passion?
No, I don't think so. So tell me.
Yeah, it's a really interesting theory by Robert Vallerand. It's this general idea, and it's been applied in lots of different ways, but it kind of comes out of the theory of self determination that we choose things that we feel naturally drawn to and passionate about.
Hmm.
And we get to make those decisions for ourselves. And the idea here is, how do we differentiate the things that we're really passionate about that become part of our identity, right? So, you know, I
Hmm.
don't just ride a bike, I'm a cyclist. I don't just play the guitar, I'm a guitarist. I don't run, I am a runner. I don't play video games, I am a gamer. You know, when those things start becoming part of our identity, that's often an indication that we have a strong passion for it. We're willing to put time, energy, effort in growing what that means for us. The split is this obsessive passion and harmonious passion. Harmonious passion being when we can engage in our activity freely, but we can also let it go when we need to. And obsessive passion is when we have to engage in that behavior because of what it means for our identity, what it means about me, how I represent myself to other people. And oftentimes that comes into play when I have to not engage and or if circumstances would prevent me from engaging, I still push myself to do it. For example, I think the easiest example you can usually think of is someone who identifies as a cyclist or a biker,
Hmm.
and they have to do it, or a runner, and they have to do it even though the conditions for doing so are adverse. It's
Yeah.
snowing, it's raining, it's potentially dangerous, but it's so important for me to engage in that
Hmm.
I forego the danger because I just need to do it. And that's kind of where we go fall back into if it's causing problems in other areas of our life. And I think it's a great theory to kind of frame that because it's very approachable.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It sounds like it, and I don't know the model very well, but almost like it could be on a spectrum, even from like the obsessive to harmonious end. And um, I, that gives a lot of flexibility, which we need when we're
Yeah,
understanding people and ourselves.
exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's good. I'm gonna have to look that one up. I'm gonna have to do my nonfiction reading.
There you go. I'm happy I can help.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, from the time that you maybe started this research to now, like there's just been such a rise of, more games and online communities and esports. How do you see like the intersection of gaming and mental health evolving?
And I think it's actually fantastic. This is where I actually had the research I want to do because I know I've done a lot of research around the negative aspects of gaming, but I love
Mhm.
gaming. I'm a gamer myself, and I think that there's a lot of tremendous upside that comes with video gaming, and thankfully the research is starting to bear that out. Uh,
Mhm.
Recently, I was even just reading an article. That was kind of referring to Martin Seligman's research around perma and flourishing with mental health, and that gaming can really relate a lot to those areas of personal satisfaction, engagement. I think video games really teach us. Like, think about when you played games when you were a kid, and I grew up on Nintendo, and those games were really hard. Right? But
Yeah.
you sit down, you play Super Mario Brothers, for example, and you don't win that the first time that you play. You play, You die, you learn. You play more, you get better. You die, you learn more. And it teaches us
Mhm.
things around perseverance, stress tolerance, self efficacy, because we feel good when we've accomplished things. And games are awesome at doing that because they usually have a skill level that goes up as you get better at the game. And so we're always kind of on the threshold of what our skill level is versus what the game is throwing at us. So it's accomplishable but challenging. And that's where we fall into that idea of like Csikszentmihalyi's idea of flow and finding ourselves kind of losing ourselves to the game. That's a very satisfying thing. But then even go in the other way, you talk about online games and they teach us things like building relationships and teamwork and leadership. And I've worked with clients who struggled with connecting with other people and had them play online games to help
Mhm.
bridge the gap between some of their skills and coping and how to engage with people in maybe a safer place. So I think there's just a lot of benefits around gaming that we just haven't really tapped into yet and really isn't shared widely yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I know I have had some clients who even have shared it just helps them visualize or, kind of feel what maybe they have struggled to feel in real life, right? In reality, that it gives them some permission or space to see themselves as the character and even reflect on those things. And sometimes it does make them like, "Oh, I feel a little more existential about things," but that's not a bad thing. I think sometimes we feel like, "Oh," but it's like, "What is my purpose?" And reflect and maybe come closer to like, "Hey, I'm feeling confused about this." But identifying that might be a result of being in that character role.
And thank you for mentioning that because I think that's another really interesting aspect of online role playing games where you get to create an avatar for yourself to represent you in the game to other people, real people. And
Mhm.
this is where a lot of folks who are struggling with identity can find a safe place to explore alternatives, whether that's gender or, pushing themselves in different aspects of their own identity in life. They can try on different hats in a relatively anonymous space, but a safe place that oftentimes they're going to find some level of acceptance. And I think that that's a really important piece that we often overlook, and also a resource and tool that we as counselors can use.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and, like, I think your point of trying to figure out the positive, like, characteristics of these things rather than it just being, like, all negative, it's an addictive behavior and
Yeah.
just, poo-poo it and, like, stay away is, wait, this is, the flexibility of kind of, like, that harmonious, obsessive passion because there probably are some benefits here, like, let's not throw those out just because we know there's some potential, problems that could arise. Where do we see the positive stuff? It's really important. I try even with like when kind of zooming out from games, but with social media or things like that to empower people like, hey, social media can be awesome. There's so much community. Same with gaming communities. There can be community or there can be things that really inspire you, but sometimes it is on the individual to realize like their ability in curating some of it or their choice in it of, if this game is really causing me a lot of emotional turmoil, maybe that's not the one for me, but maybe this is, and being able to help clients navigate that is really important.
Yeah, I think you mentioned community and you mentioned esports earlier. And I think that with the explosion of esports, it is partly due to gamers finding a community. Oftentimes before online games and the technology allowed us to connect with people, gaming was often a very either solitary or low community activity. And now that we have things like Twitch and we have gaming tournaments that are televised on TV, gamers found their community. I mean, music fans have concerts, and sports fans can go to games or watch games on TV. And now gamers can watch online tournaments. And So much so that there was I know I can't remember which tournament it was specifically, but I think they drew over 100 million views during the tournament itself, which is not just comparable to other mediums, whether that's like movies or music or sports, but is exceeding,
Yeah,
them.
that's
So
incredible.
obviously people are were hungry for this, and now they have a little bit of an outlet that they can find that.
Mhm. I'm curious because I've recently been trying to weave this in for people who may find it beneficial, but I think gamifying things is also really motivating for people. Have you, I guess, read anything about it, or at least in your own experience with like working with clients and students, found that to be beneficial?
Well, have I ever? There's one of my favorite researchers, and actually one of the folks that I drew a lot of inspiration from when I was starting to really research this topic. And this is where she talks about um, not necessarily gamifying, but understanding things and contextualizing them from a game perspective was Jane McGonigal, and she has a couple of TED talks out there that are pretty well known on how gaming can save the world, and she has a book called Reality is Broken, and how we're fleeing to online worlds because they're so satisfying. Games fill a need, and they always have in our history. But trying to think about, and if I can share a little bit of her story, she writes about, and talks about she is a game designer by trade, and she got a really major concussion. And as she was dealing with the recovery of the concussion, she became very depressed. She started having suicidal ideations, and she was really struggling. And she kind of just reflected and said, if I'm going to recover from this, I need to use what I know. So I'm going to make this basically a game. And she looked at she called herself Jane the Concussion Slayer, and she took on the role of the protagonist, and the concussion was the antagonist. And just like video games, we have power ups, and we have allies, and we have enemies that we need to battle. And she actually developed a lot of this into what is called Super Better. And there's an app to it. There's a book that accompanies that, and it's this essentially idea of how we match up these gaming ideas to our own personal goals, and they can be really relevant to anything. And the research has kind of bared out that there's some real efficacy to, in for lack of a better word, gamifying our goals and kind of thinking about those things through that perspective. It's very, very
Yeah.
akin to narrative therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. That's what I was thinking as you were sharing that story with her as the protagonist and the
Mhm.
concussion as the antagonist. Yeah, that's really cool. I've recently discovered an app, and uh a client and I were talking about it, and I was like, "Okay, let me look into it a little bit more," but it's very much like aligning the personal goals with uh your did you ever have a Tamagotchi pet? Does that sound familiar? I'm dating myself.
No, I think I was just on the other side of being too old for Tamagotchis, but I know exactly what they are.
So, for those who might be a little younger and not aware, or a little older and never bought it for anyone or played it themselves, is it's a little like keychain pet from the 90s where you had to take care of the pet with just like feeding it and giving it water and things like that. And if not, the pet would die, which is really sad. But it was like the hot ticket toy item. And I remember them getting like banned from schools and people being like, "Mom, can you take my Tamagotchi to work so it doesn't die today?" But in a similar fashion, there's an app where you have a pet, but by you completing your daily habits or goals that you have set forth, you earn points and you can take care of your pet, and your pet gets to go on adventures because of you like taking care of yourself. And so it's a really kind of a cool approach, but I was like, "Oh yeah, this is like pretty sweet." Like that maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but there's this like motivation of like if I have to externalize taking care of something else, maybe I can also better take care of myself. So I love the idea of how we can use those things to support people instead of just stigmatizing that it's a bad habit.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of how those principles can be applied in a fun way, engaging way, but also
Mhm.
a motivating way to help us accomplish what we're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So, anything to add on gaming that you feel like maybe we didn't touch on?
No, but if you want to know more, you can reach out to me. You can tell by how I talk about it. I'm pretty passionate about this
Yeah,
topic.
yeah, it's
So,
really exciting. And I'm going to pull up some of those resources. We can link those in the show notes so that people can learn a little more on their own independently as well.
excellent.
So I know you've listened to the episode, so you knew episodes, I should say, like that. This question is the one we ask for everyone. The name of the podcast is Ohio Counseling Conversations. So, what important conversations do you think counseling professionals should be having with each other and/or their clients in our state?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I tried to give this some thought, knowing that the question was coming. And I guess I would point back to what we mentioned early about the legislation around mental health assistance, and inform ourselves about that. But also just with the November election coming around the corner, there are more things to attend to than just the presidential race. There's so many things that we have to keep our eyes on in terms of who and what we're voting for and how they can impact our profession, such as access to mental health care, cost of insurance and medications, impact on our ability to develop our professional identity, help our clients develop their personal identity and seek out personal wellness. There's always kind of things that have ramifications that we may not fully be thinking about when we vote. So just kind of taking a look and having conversations with our colleagues about the impacts of the things that are coming up on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that is a great segue and soft plug because that's also a little bit about what we'll be talking about with Dr. Kress in that next episode. So, yeah, voting is important uh, for everyone. But when we have a profession that can be significantly impacted um, by the ways in which people vote, it's important for us to pay attention to not only how it might affect us as a person and our families, but like also as hey, will I have a job? Will I be paid the same? Will my clients be able to be supported in the same ways? Will I be feeling more helpless in trying to support populations that I serve? So definitely very critical, very important. I appreciate you saying it.
Exactly. Thank you.
Right. Well, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap for today, Mike?
I don't think so. I've had fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for joining us. And I know we'll be seeing you soon. There's a lots of emails that come through about different meet and greets, and All Ohio is coming up here at the end of October. So if you haven't registered and you want to go, you can go to ohiocounseling.org and get all the info. And we will see you again on our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.
Hi, folks. It's Dr. Marissa Cargill again. We wanted to share something little with you, and you might hear that I lost my voice, but more importantly, Ohio Counseling Conversations took to the halls at our conference last fall, and we hope that you'll hear the wonderful, albeit brief, conversations we were able to have with folks at the conference. If you're on the fence about joining our organization and/or the conference, please take a listen. We hope to see you there, October 28th through the 30th in Columbus.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Cargill, host of Ohio Counseling Conversations, joined here with Shanice. We wanted to ask some members questions about the conference, the podcast, the organization.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you a couple of quick fire. How's that sound? All
Fine with
right.
me.
What would you say to someone who's on the fence about joining OCA?
I would say this is actually my first year at AOCC, and it has been so fun. So just getting that connection with other counselors, other professionals, other teachers, instructors, professors, it's definitely worth it.
Yes, great networking. What important conversations do you think counselors should be having with each other and or their clients in state?
Ooh, so I definitely think the theme of this conference, Bridging the Cultural Divide, I think That's important conversations to have. A lot of people shy away from conversations about culture and religion.
Yep.
And I think those conversations are really important.
Yeah, definitely. Some uncomfortable conversations, but
Yes.
meaningful. What would you say to someone who's maybe on the fence about joining OCA?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You have to join it. You get to meet some awesome people, some great people, network with folks, and connect and join. Like, really get to be a part of a community of folks. It's great.
Yeah, community is not the first time I've heard that word today and talked to some counselors, so I feel like this is a theme. Let's keep that in mind. Now, moving on to another question. What's your favorite part about being a counselor?
Well, I work with adolescents and families and little ones, so I get to play and I get to like talk about fun things. So I like to do things that's helping kids and families, and it just brings joy to my life just to kind of really help people. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people say that it seems really cheesy, but I think helping folks and kind of helping them get through the things that are really challenging. So
Yeah, that type of connection is there, and it gives something to like that we're social and we need to like work with other people.
Yeah.
It's relational. I love that. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is Marissa from Ohio Counseling Conversations here with Chim Diogo. What are the most valuable or meaningful pieces of work that you think we do as counselors?
For me, it's I think relating with the clients, and also like something that really calls out to me in the counseling profession is the fact that I see lots of conversations about diversity and equity and inclusivity. And it's very important to me because I'm an international student in the States,
Sure.
and well,
Yeah.
I'm also a queer student, and
Yeah.
well, I'm a woman, so there's like lots
Well,
of
lots
that,
of
yeah.
intersections,
Yeah,
right?
so I find those very important, and I appreciate
Yeah.
them.
I love everything that you're saying here. That's so like I feel like we could just go on and on and on, but that is a beautiful conversation. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
What are some of the key takeaways you've had so far today?
So it's amazing because every time I go to a different session, I see more and more of what we need in our schools.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm going away with great ideas, resources, connections, meeting people. It's awesome.
What important conversations do you think counselors should be having with each other or their clients and students?
Oh, they should be having conversations about basically equity, how to reach every kid, regardless of circumstance, situation, socioeconomic status, race, all of that.
I
We
love
need to
that.
talk about how we can connect to
Yeah,
everyone.
how do we get it?
Yep.
Seeing like all the tables set up and like they're giving like giveaways.
Woohoo,
I
free
love
stuff.
free stuff.
Yes, yes.
But I've also seen like some really interesting like presentations recently,
Cool.
and it's been
Yeah.
awesome.
So it's always important to remember like counselors are human beings too.
Yes.
So what are you loving as a human being right now?
As a human being, I love that people are so vulnerable. Like, and I'm just learning a lot about people personally and not
Okay.
just professionally. So
All right.
it just seems very interesting. Like, I went to the Tale of Two Clinicians this morning and like hearing their stories about being suicide survivors, and that was just so intriguing to me because
Awesome.
it's great.
Awesome. It sounds like you're having a great time. Thanks for stopping by.
Yes, thank you.
I'm joined here with Casey. Hi, Casey.
Hi.
So is this your first time at the conference?
Yes, it is.
What are some good things that have been happening for you so far?
It's been really cool to be able to meet other first-time counselors too and connect
Awesome.
with them.
What conversations, important conversations, do you think that counselors should be having with each other or with their clients in the state?
I just think being real with our kids, whatever that might be, if it's about home or school, what's expected of them, just being really real about it and not trying to beat around the bush.
Okay, we like it. We got a student advocate here with Casey. Casey, thanks for stopping by. We're so happy to have you.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right, yay. So
I'm
what are you
excited.
enjoying most about the conference right now?
I think it's just like feeling like there is a community because it can feel so isolating. And so knowing that there are all these other therapists or grad students, I'm in grad school, just feel that sense of community.
We have such a
Yeah.
strong professional community here.
Mhm.
So tell us if there are some important conversations you feel like counselors should be having in our state right now.
I think just more openness about the struggles that counselors have and how much we should be in therapy ourselves.
Ooh,
And
yes.
that is a normal thing to struggle with our own mental health.
Yeah, normalize that we're human too.
Yeah,
Awesome. I love that,
yeah.
Martha. Thanks for
All
stopping
right,
by.
thank
Yay. I'm joined here with Yub. Hi, Yub.
Hello, nice to meet you.
So what are some good things that are happening at AOCC from your perspective right now?
Yeah, I really love meeting different people and counselors in Ohio.
Yeah.
I love hearing from them and learning from them. and kind of learning about different topics that are relevant to today's
Sure.
day and age,
For sure.
outside of my primary interest and specialty.
Awesome. So what would you hope to get out of AOCC in years, in the future?
Yeah. I would love to see more sex positivity related topics and presentations in future AOCC.
What is the most valuable or meaningful thing about the work we do as counselors from your perspective?
Well, I think that we help people in their daily lives, just, whether it be at school or
How do you function day to day?
yeah,
Getting
yeah,
that.
and really, that's why this conference is so valuable because it gives you new ideas. And I'm retired now, but I still use all this. That's why I come year to year to keep my license up. Beside that, to connect with people and to really learn, relearn, and learn new techniques. Because whether it be with your friends or with the people at church or the people in an organization you belong to, you always can be using that counseling technique.
Ohio Counseling Conversations is on a mission to make this podcast meaningful to you, and we can't do that without your help. A feedback form is linked in the show notes for this episode and is also available on the OCA Linktree. If you have any recommendations for topics or guests or any other general feedback, you can let us know by using the form. We welcome your thoughts so that we can continue to develop the podcast and grow as creators. If you are interested in joining the team or being a guest, you can also reach us by emailing ohiocounselingconversations@gmail.com. We value your insight. Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow us so you can stay up to date with Ohio Counseling Conversations online and wherever you listen to podcasts.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Counseling Association's Media, Public Relations, and Membership Committee and its podcast subcommittee. This podcast features original music selections by Elijah Sototer-Wood and our closing song, A Creation Discotheque by Who AD. Views, beliefs, or references mentioned in this episode do not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by the Ohio Counseling Association. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect the view of the Ohio Counseling Association or any of its officials. Thank you.